Oh wow, hello.
Oh wow.
You look so
Whoa,
stupid
whoa,
with that
whoa!
haircut. What did you
Holy
do?
shit!
Why did you do that? What did you do?
Hello, my boys and
Hello.
girls, my
All
beautiful,
right.
beautiful
Oh,
people.
so literally we are like anonymous caller.
Oh wow, that's a
That is
job
smart.
well done. Jajib,
Yeah,
did you by any chance, what did the anonymous caller cut your hair?
I'll give you a little update, listener. Is that this new thing that we're trying to do at Three Friends and a Tippany is that we, us three friends, think that you guys, are a little bored of listening to us on repeat continuously again and again, and I think that's a requirement of a new perspective at times. And we also want to make Three Friends and a Tippany a little more inclusive, where we, introduce another fresh opinion, and we actually allow our listeners to come on to this podcast and just rant to their three friends. We're making us three friends a little more accessible so that even you can be part of this friendship actually, and actually take active participation in it.
We are not therapists, but we're acting like therapists in a way.
Yeah.
Are we?
Chill kar.
We are just listening to
So-
your bakchodi, and that's it,
Yes.
and helping you deal with it if we can. Bas.
Yes. So, what is the format and how is this being done? So basically, the next update is that we're going to release podcasts every 2 weeks now instead of every week. That's one. And how we're going to do this is that every time we go on a recording session, which is usually on Saturday night, Sunday night, or Monday morning, Indian Standard Time, we will put out a link on our social media, which is either Instagram, a link in bio, or the link on Twitter or other social media channels that we have. And we say the link is up live at this time, and you can, any particular listener can join the Zoom call at that particular time, and they can have a conversation with us for 45 minutes. The only rule being that there are no names and no face, it's just the voice.
So I have no idea who we're talking to. Neither does Ishmi.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty
So,
cool.
right?
Make friends
And
like
scary and intimidating. Ooh.
Yeah, so the reason why it is anonymous right now is that everyone who comes on this platform is anonymous. It's not because of the particular person's story that we've kept them anonymous. Whoever, let's say there's a particular individual X who has an issue with their dog barking and wants to rant about that, he can come on, and even he or she will be anonymous when they rant to us about that. So, having said that,
Let us begin.
let us
So,
Yes,
begin.
sir.
so 1 second. I don't know. I have no. So I'm never going to get to know who the person is.
No, you
Oh
will
my
not
god.
get to
Yaar,
know.
ये तो
So
थोड़ा
the
खतरनाक हो गया.
yeah.
Okay, so
the
listener, if acha, go on, Joe, first complete.
So the trick or the mystery of this entire thing is that we, along with the listener, will be trying to figure out who that person is, or we're not trying to figure out. We'll just know their story, and we won't have a bias behind what we are asking, because we don't know how they
Yeah.
look like, what their gender is, what they speak like.
So
We know
now,
what they
so
speak
now,
like.
yeah. So now, basically, all we're saying is this is what Georgie's trying to do here. He's trying to remove stereotypes. So
Yeah,
the
I'm trying to remove
moment
prejudice.
the moment you see somebody, the moment you hear them speak, and the moment you know who they are, like I just feel there are so many preconceived notions that you just have in your head automatically, and it's not. It's very like it's very you do that very subconsciously, and not
Yeah.
like oh I'm judging this person head up, you know. So I think this will be fun.
Also, one more thing, anonymous caller or Amanda or Amrinder, we'll find out. Uh, if, since we will never know who you are, if we have impacted your life positively,
Or
someday after
negatively.
or no, positively, after 5 years, just send us a message ki, hey, तुमने मेरी जिंदगी में थोड़ा बदलाव लाया. With that, I think I'll rest very peacefully.
बाप रे बाप. So
On that
heavy हो
note,
गया.
This social
cool.
validation of Ishmi
Cool.
just carries on and on.
Yeah, little
Still
bit, little
got
bit.
got.
No, I'm in
So,
agreement.
with this week, this guest that we have has already joined our call, and we already have our anonymous caller with a rainbow DP already who has joined our particular video chat.
Very
So, anonymous
positive.
caller, if you could unmute yourself, and let's start this episode for today.
Okay, hi.
Amrinder,
Nice to talk to you.
it is Amrinder.
Why? Could be Amanda also.
Okay, yeah. Just okay. Sorry. Go on. Nice one, Joe. Good
I
spot.
Such stereotypes, Ishmeet. Oh my
Arey,
god.
awaz. Okay, fine. Cool, cool. I'll work on it.
Stereotyping already. But
All
anyway,
right.
yeah, go ahead.
What's up?
hello,
How you
hello,
doing?
hello.
How you doing, buddy? How's it going?
I've been better. Let me not start with that cliche response. I'm fine.
I
So I've
like it.
been
Alright.
much better because we have a bad day. We can be dying on the inside, but we still say that we're fine. So it's good days and bad days and a lot of days in the middle. So and it's okay to say that we're not fine.
Dude,
Beautiful.
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
is so nice. I wish I could say
So,
that to myself. I'm like, I'm not okay. Sorry, madad kar do meri.
what do you want to talk about today? Since we've decided that normally, usually we decide the topics, but this time we give complete the floor to you, and we ask you what you want to talk about, what do you want to rant to us about.
Okay, so should I jump into this rant? Okay, fine.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So I'll begin with saying that I've been listening to the show since it started, and it struck a chord because it's people who we know from our lives who we've not been in touch with for a long time, and getting to know how they're doing or how they're thinking. On another level, it's also about a sense of nostalgia because I've gone to the same school as you guys did. So I was curious that these conversations were happening. The podcast addressed important issues and things like stereotypes, body shaming, notions of what is cool and what's not cool.
Yeah.
And what's interested me is that while you've had your experiences in school and in life, um, all the three of you, it has been, a homogeneous, similar experience, because the three, they're very, there are similarities between the three of you, and there are many commonalities which that
Yeah.
the three of you have. And
Yeah.
so, which is that the three of you are all, doing well in life, well in the conventional sense of the term, sufficiently privileged. No offense, but Rahul's doing a little extra super well, in a first world country. But we're not judging him for that. No judgment. Yeah. And this is also my way of showing that I've been following the episodes, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
and given all of this, your experiences have
Hmm.
been homogeneous
Yeah.
in terms of the fact that all of you are cisgender individuals and that all of you are straight heterosexual men, right?
Hmm.
And this is where I wasn't being able to relate to your Tippany's in many ways because I'm gay and I'm privileged like you guys to be cisgender also. I acknowledge that. But I've had a set of experiences in school ranging, which have been extremely unpleasant, like microaggressions, which we can talk about later on, to being blatantly unpleasant, right? Such as physical attack, cyberbullying by people in our own school. And
Hmm.
since this was happening around me, I wasn't being able to reach out to friends in school because they wouldn't understand that at the time. Teachers wouldn't understand and would often perpetuate that behavior. So I haven't been able to talk about it, particularly with people from school, and therefore reconnect back to old friends. And therefore, the need to have these uncomfortable and unsettling conversations among people our age, and playing a role in bringing about that cultural change by having sensible and mature conversations, and therefore to spread awareness through that. So that's
Yeah.
why I reached out because the show was already having, these conversations. Because when I thought of school, I thought, are people not talking about this at all? Is there a total absence or lack of conversation about these issues? And the moment I found that these podcasts the episodes were addressing these issues, I was pleasantly surprised and therefore decided to reconnect so that I could talk about my experience. So simply put, while our school has been, for the most part, has been a fun-filled, mostly pleasant experience for you guys, things have been particularly rough for me due to a number of reasons, and this rant is about the same, right? So
Oh,
should I
okay.
go into it?
go attack, go head on.
Absolutely, man.
And
Absolutely.
if there's
Okay.
anything, right, the disclaimer at the very beginning, if there's anything that either one of us has done or not done, you can put that out also. You can
I feel
go
like
absolutely into it and have no holds barred kind of a thing.
oh, okay. Yeah. No, okay, can I just say something before you start? It's just like there are so many things when you're in school, no, you're just not aware of. It's like you just turn a blind eye to so many things and you're like, yeah, whatever, screw it. Because at that point of time, you care about yourself, your friends, your musty,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
like just getting on with it. Other people's problems are not as major as they are now, especially with this conversation specifically coming into light in the world over the last 5 years a lot more. You know, especially with what everything the Indian
Yeah,
government did, and just people talking more about it and it being more accepted versus something that you can't talk about with anybody.
Yeah, I guess
absolutely.
so. Plus, I also
Yeah.
think to a certain extent we weren't that mature when we were. I mean, all of us, not just we. I'm not giving us like an escape because of this. I'm just saying, like I was pretty dumb and immature. That Rahul was though. Don't even ask. But still,
What about
I
me, bro?
think
You didn't.
no comments on Ishmeet's.
No, no, but that's true. I think we weren't, I think, equipped in our minds also to understand. Maybe again,
Yeah.
not an escape or what we just didn't know. Or like, how should a person respond or
Right.
react? Maybe.
Also,
I don't know.
understand this, like going to an all boys school, this was not a concept we were ever spoken, and that also being Jesuit. Let's
Right.
let's talk about
Yeah.
that. It was something that was never introduced to us.
Hmm.
Those conversations never occurred with teachers, with the principals, whatever. Nobody ever addressed this. Not again, not
Yeah.
an escape, but I mean, just people should be
Yeah.
more aware of
Yeah.
this.
I think
Yeah.
let's hear our
Yeah.
anonymous caller
Absolutely.
and
Caller.
their
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So now, as now, as a gay man, given the amount of homophobic prejudice and discrimination that exists in India and the world still, I still haven't been able to come out of the closet and talk to people openly about my sexual orientation. And the roots of this were in school, because in the school environment, this bullying is where it all started. And so we go back to thinking about the fact that when we were in school, we were conditioned by our families, and there was a need to fit in because of things like peer pressure. And so anyone who appeared different was bullied and therefore excluded. So for me, it started with those mundane phrases, which are also very familiar once we think about them. Why are you so girly? Are you pansy? Why do you use your hands while talking? Or why do you wave them about? Do you like boys? That's disgusting. You're abnormal. So there's a whole list. And there was
Yeah.
blatant transphobic slurs, right? Because before came the you're gay, that's horrible. It was, your chakka and, etc. So there can be a whole list of slurs which we can list. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
these events so these events which have been very traumatic for me, and I've been trying to make sense of them because I've been a liberal arts student and I've studied sociology, and I'm trying to make sense of the ways that I was treated. And there's this psychological theory which is called the injection of trauma, which means that these deep feelings of hurt and pain take root deep inside you, inside of the individual, and they begin to shatter your self confidence and self esteem in many ways. And I'll connect this to the point on toxic masculinity and the discrimination against effeminate people. So the fact that we have this conception of normal hegemonic masculinity, and these would extend to form toxic, violent behavior traits, translating into subjugation and discrimination faced by women and queer people. Um, so the fact that you're not a man, you're not masculine enough, what are you even doing? And so, one of my worried, lonesome musings on the school balcony was why I identified with those terms, and why I wasn't quote unquote normal like everybody else, right? Because everybody used masculine identifiers for gendered behavior. So if you didn't walk a certain way, you were abnormal. If you didn't, hold yourself, or if your gestures weren't a certain way, you were abnormal. If your mannerisms were a certain way, you're abnormal. So this is also why many peers outrightly labeled me abnormal or questioned my normality. Many years later, I would unlearn this with my therapist's help, that normality was the direct equivalent of the privilege of being cisgender, suitably masculine and compulsorily heterosexual. Uh, so what would you? I can go on, but
Yeah,
let's have a round of
I
applause.
think you'll have to, explain that to a little extent. I understand that maybe some of our listeners would understand certain terms that you've used. Let's, but many of our listeners might not be able to exactly understand each and every term that you've spoken to exactly get to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
So, with the very outset, you said you identify as a cisgender, and so do I, and so do all of the others here. But what exactly is a cisgender person? Let's start off with that, and gradually we'll keep ticking off a few definitions just to be on the same page.
Yeah. Okay. So, uh, so cisgender men and women are those who believe that the sex they're born into is which is male or female matches their preferred category of identifying as a man or a woman, right? Which means that if you have male reproductive parts and if it matches your behavior as your condition to be a man, then you're cisgender. This is opposed to being transgender because transgender individuals have a mismatch of their sex with their gender, giving rise to them being called gender queer or gender non-conforming. Um, there are gender non-conforming individuals as well who do not align themselves within the gender spectrum. Um, and so, yeah, is that clear or should I?
I think that's
Rahul
good.
had, I think,
I didn't have a
yeah.
question. It's just right now that you just blew my mind with the definitions. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, oh my god, this makes so much
Okay.
sense because it's not something I've very actively thought about. Like, I
Huh.
mean, you think about it, you just, and then coming back to his point where he's talking about privilege, I think we talk about privilege only with certain things. It's like what you're born into. And, whether you're white, black, Indian, Latino, whatever it is, we talk about that kind of privilege that you have. But we don't talk about gender privilege. I don't think,
Nice.
right? Like, think about it. It's like, as a man or a woman who's heterosexual, those privileges of being accepted, of not being stereotyped, like, I mean, you're automatically stereotyped into that. But then here we're just like, how behavior is a stereotype. It's like his character is something so different. He used to do different things in school compared to us. But then you would always find
Yeah.
people who would be like, oh, being a male, you have to be confident. You have to have a firm handshake. And I saw this really nice. It was a comedy, whatever, 1 hour comedy thing on Netflix for Veer Das. Okay, and he was addressing this, and I really loved it. He's like, why do men have to shake hands firmly? Why? To like, what are
Okay.
you trying to achieve by that? Are you just trying to show you're more powerful? Like, it's just one thing. Like, why can't you just be a normal handshake? Like, you're from the moment you shake somebody's hand when you meet somebody new, you're judged.
Oh,
Yeah. True.
damn.
Yeah.
Nice.
Think about that and imagine that in this kind of perspective where it's on a much larger scale, but it's not talked about and people are not aware of.
Yeah, I had these few people in college who were like they're very aggressive when they shake hands. They used to give their hand like this, okay?
Yeah,
They shake
yeah,
hands like
yeah.
this, and then they hold firmly like that as hard as possible. I'm like, I was to aise karke, like, okay, bro,
हाँ
go.
भाई तू powerful है तू जा.
Uh-huh. So let's go on. Let's go on.
Yeah, you mentioned unlearning. So, how did that go on for you as well?
Yeah. So based on the discrimination that I endured, I was pretty sure that some peers knew that I was gay. I was gay. Some had the decent courtesy not to ask. Others were, laughing and mocking and things like that. And others were downright violent, right? So, because, they weren't being able to make sense of what it's like to be in the presence of someone who's so different. So, to most in the school environment, I'd made myself invisible, shadowed out of the spotlight. Therefore, most peers, would probably not recollect who I am or wouldn't be well suited to recognize me. So either I didn't have the courage to speak to them, or they sent out verbal and non-verbal, stay away from me cues. Sometimes maybe I was imagining them because I wasn't self-confident. So consequently, I'd not gone to talk about this with anyone, no friends, no family, no teachers. So in essence, a complete support system was absent, right? So there was a lack of that. Um, yeah. So I didn't talk about all of this in school, and later on, it landed me in therapy, right? And then I had to talk to my counselor, talk to my therapist, and I got to learn that this is how things have happened, and to admit that our school has been, quite frankly, a nasty place in some senses, right? And pretty horrible.
Can
Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think?
and so if we were to talk about toxic masculinity, like Rahul was saying, range of behavior. So not, handshakes, the way you're approaching people, the way you think,
It,
how a person is sitting differently,
mhm.
or yeah,
It's like
and
the
then
way you talk, the way you walk, everything, like everything is just judged automatically. And I mean, I'm not saying
yeah,
I've
it is.
not done it, and I completely, like, I am in agreement with that. It's like I did turn a blind eye, and at that point in time. But I had one question. Okay,
Yeah,
so like when you, like, I'm just
yeah,
trying to understand. Um, Excuse me if I'm politically incorrect. Okay, so
sure,
say the homogeneous community. Okay, right, just being gay. So like
yeah,
when you say that some people were decent enough not to ask, right,
uh-huh.
if you're gay or not, like, I'm just trying to understand, is it offensive to ask somebody that they're gay? And especially if, like, I mean, say, like, say you are gay, and if I were to come to you and ask you that you're gay, is that uh just offensive? I'm just trying to understand.
You could, yeah. You could ask someone who's queer or gay, if you step aside and you ask them politely, and in by not announcing it in public, of course, and and just take the person aside and ask them very quietly, "Are you gay?"
Right,
And
right.
but that's what some say. Others wouldn't agree to this. Others would say. I mean, that's what I think. Others would say that you're not supposed to judge someone's sexuality, so you just let them be. And the rule in the queer community is that if the person is not telling you what your sexuality is, you don't ask, right? So you if the person tells you, he tells you, or she tells you, or they tell you.
Okay,
Otherwise, we don't have that conversation.
interesting.
I I think just one. I just had one pointer. So I think it basically applies in the same way as it does to a heterosexual person. If we are to normalize all sorts of genders and all sorts of sexualities,
Hmm.
then would you ask a heterosexual person if you are heterosexual? You would not, right? That's that person's personal business, and you don't want to
Right,
indulge yourself into
right.
that. In the same way, you would not go out and ask a homosexual person if they are homosexual or not.
I think that's a
So,
very good point, which he mentioned, that unless the person is announcing it himself or herself, you shouldn't go probing into the matter,
so yeah,
right?
so it's
I
like,
have a question.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead,
Rahul.
go ahead, go ahead.
So caller, right? So I think I've been speaking, remarkably much lesser than what I do in the other episode, because I'm just very overwhelmed. Like, I
Sure.
whenever somebody asks, like, I'm right now staying in Bombay with 4 5 lads, and all of them, most of them from Calcutta. So telling them ki, guys, mera Xavier's ka experience was amazing. It's like the best school, and we have these Xavier's and Lamartine battles. I still feel like, I think that whatever, even if it even if it's helped me in whatever way, I think Xavier's has been very important, not just for the way what we were taught and everything, but because of the friends I also made through Xavier's. These two idiots, right on my right. So, the point is, I never, and then when I think of it, ki, yes, there were people who were doing this, right, sitting on my side. कि ना कि भाई वो देख कैसे चल रहा है. Like, you see the guy's tiptoeing. Look, he's got a handkerchief in his hand all the time. And now that I think of it, then I was like, and I used to possibly even maybe be a part of these things. I don't know, and I'm feeling very bad about it. But I'll be honest here. So, tell me, what was it? When did anybody ever did you ever tell anybody at all when you were in school? Maybe you made a friend, if there was a specific friend, and what was their reaction? Or for that matter, if there was a friend who was also gay for that matter, and you found out, what was their reaction?
And
And did you yeah, I just want to know that. What's it like,
to,
to be frank?
to add to his question, like, I'm just asking, like, how did you know, and
Yeah.
like when did you know? Because I don't know, like, how somebody else would identify with what they are and who they are.
Um.
So I'm just curious.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
it happens the same way as it happens to a heterosexual person. When do you start realizing you like a girl, right? When do you start realizing that you have feelings for the opposite sex? So it's basically the same thing, right? You're growing up, and voila, you're attracted, you know, and you really you can't make sense of it at first because we grow up in a society which is so homophobic and heterosexualized. And there's a term for it. This is called heteronormative, heteronormativity, which is, heterosexuality is the norm. And so it happens the same way. It happens, in the age of 11 or 12 or 13, when when a normal, when a heterosexual person is figuring out that they have, feelings for the opposite sex. And so, you know, I felt that, I started realizing that I started feeling attracted to the same sex. And it was difficult because it was an all boys school, right? Because we were all, in, and so we were like, so I was like, I'm not being able to make sense of this. Should I be attracted? Should I not be attracted? So these questions do come up. And these questions are difficult because you can't talk to your peers. Uh, you can't talk to your teachers. You can't talk to anyone else. And it's particularly disturbing. It takes a toll on your mental health. And I will go back to the question which Ishmeet asked, which is how did I unlearn this, right? So the thing is that problematic things like this were happening around me, but there was a way I wasn't being able to reach out to other people because there's something called internalization, right? Which is when you're exposed to something so much, you internalize that feeling completely and you respond to it and you sort of become that. So what I mean is, when these problematic things were happening around you guys, you didn't see you didn't notice that these things were happening, right? Because it had been internalized. And so you didn't see that people were being horrible to the queer kids, or we had people in our school who were disabled, we had people in our school who were mentally ill, and they were being discriminated against, made to sit on separate benches, stand outside the classroom. uh, I can go on, right? So the thing is, you don't understand that this is happening because the majority uh, outweighs the minority. So it's simple maths and it's simple statistics, right? And so I had to unlearn. And so what, the problematic things that were happening around me, I thought that they were fine. The world is supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to be discriminated against, and that is called homophobic internalization, right? So when you think that, when you realize that all of the things that is happening against you is actually correct, and you start to feel that this is how the world is supposed to be, and then it fucks you up.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Whoa.
It's like a mental
That
manipulation to
was
yourself. That was fucking deep and disturbing.
what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So sorry that you had to go through all that. And I really can't
that's
imagine
okay.
going through all that at a tender age of our school years. So
Yeah, right.
I think what Ishmeet, and also I had a question regarding what Ishmeet asked, and the question is that
Uh-huh.
how we three of us, and we have three more, who found some sort of support system in each other, let's say, to
Uh-huh.
spend time with, have similar interests, things of that sort. Did you have something of that where you had a
Yeah,
small community of your own where you vibed with those people, or did you not have that support?
at all in school and maybe
Not
even beyond.
really.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let me start with school, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So at school, um, I I wasn't being able to reach out to the people who were also being bullied like me. So I knew that there was another queer person who was being bullied, there was another gay person who was being bullied, but I could never approach that person and talk about it because it was such a stigma to talk about, right? And you don't want to recount that trauma, that stigma, while you're in the classroom with that person, and so you just forget it and you just talk about other, the kinds of nonsense that we used to talk about in school. uh, and so, while you guys had each other and you had friends to rely on, I for me it was, you know I read books in school, I went to the library, I went to the canteen alone, and when I'm at home it was mostly, me being by myself, um, pursuing my hobbies, reading, There was a lot of binge eating. So what happens is when you're having, when you're experiencing discrimination like this systematically in school, and systemically in a school environment, you sort of try to cope with that feeling in other ways. So either you repress that in your mind, or you resort to other kinds of behaviors. So for some, it goes to, it develops into bad habits, such as alcoholism, or maybe chain smoking, or even drugs. Thankfully for me, I it was just food, so I binge ate. Yeah, so comfort food, and I went back to all of that, and that's how I dealt with it.
Very, very good decisions were made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think Rahul has this complete
Yeah.
anti drinks, anti smoking
Yeah, I drink.
policy.
I drink. I don't do anything to do with smoke. That is my only thing.
Yo.
Okay.
Not you, I'm just
Smoking
saying
is
कि that's
amazing, Rahul. You should try it sometime. Just
Ooh.
saying.
I'm good. Thank you.
Acha, caller, on another note, I don't know. I don't want to address the person as caller. It sounds so fucking weird.
What happened to your Amanpreet, Amandeep, whatever
Arey,
rubbish?
No,
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 then I thought
let's
कि नहीं करना चाहिए. Let's just say
not.
caller only. We'll get habituated to it. Caller, um, the biggest support system at times when when things like this are all screwed up, like you're not being able to find anybody to talk to. The next thing are either siblings, oh sorry, parents, or then
Uh-huh.
siblings. Like in my case, like if you've gone back to our stereotypes episode, right? If you remember that, when I was
Yeah.
going through all that, I spoke to my elder cousin. All right, so he was my
Mm-hmm.
Masi's son, and I thought ki chalo he's a fellow Sardar, he might have gone through all these things. So he became my thing because I was too scared to talk to my parents. They would be like, "Arey," the entire thing would come up. So he was the first person I spoke to about all these things, and he told me ki ye hota hai. So who was it? Like, did you ever confide in your parents in this case, or if you have siblings? I'm not. Of course, I don't know. So was that ever an option, or did you ever? What was the reciprocation from there?
Mm-hmm. Great question, Ishmi. So,
You being sarcastic or you being honest?
so
Because I'm genuinely
I'm being
curious.
honest. I'm
Okay.
being genuinely honest because it is a really good question.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. No, I didn't have a support system, right? So at home, when I was in middle school, I lost my father, right? And then when I was, so I was having to grow, I didn't have cousins. I mean, I had cousins, they stayed really far away. I didn't have any siblings. So I was an only child, so growing up alone. And my mother was a working mom, right? So she was really busy
Right.
most of the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the day was going to school, coming back, being on my own, doing homework, spending time on my own, and going back to school the next day again. So it was cyclical, yeah, and it was this cycle of loneliness which sort of developed, and it strikes you as, and you really, because all of you guys, I can imagine, have had a vibrant friendship. You guys, I used to see you playing sports on the field, football practice. There was so much fervor around that entire, the culmination of friendship in so many different ways, or hanging out after school. But since I couldn't connect to my peers naturally, because of my identity and because of my experience, I had to, sort of remain isolated, and forced to not make any connection, because the pertinent question in my mind was, what will they say? I mean, half of them already make fun of me, so why should I, even talk to them? And I don't know half of them, so why do I even go? They don't seem approachable. If I tell them I'm gay, they'll probably start laughing at me. If I tell them I'm gay, they'll probably start with some can even go. There were some who went to the teacher and they reported. And if the authorities knew, you've had it, right? It was the end
Reported
of the
saying
day,
what?
because
Yeah. Report in sense.
I mean,
Reported.
there was they were reported in the sense, there have been incidents where where queer people, gay people have been outed in our school. So the person has gone
In our
to
school.
One second. Repeat
yes,
that. What? Wait, I did not hear that. What? They gave people
I
what?
said that outed people have been outed out of their sexuality, out of the closet. Are you getting it? Are you getting
Yeah,
what
no,
I'm saying?
I got what you're saying. The first time it was the connection had an issue, but
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
go
Yeah.
on.
So, so there was this case where the person went to the authorities and said this person's gay, and the father, to the listeners, we had Jesuit priests, so we call them fathers, and so the priest called up the kid and said, this is wrong, this is against our religion, this is against the culture of the school. Uh, you can be expelled for this, right? So all these regressive ideas were internalized within the school environment, and there were teachers who perpetuated this because teachers didn't realize. And so, if the queer kid or if the gay kid exists, then the teacher was also like, you shouldn't behave this way because it's not right, it's not moral, it's not correct. You should learn from your male friends. You should sit like them, you should walk like them, you should talk like them.
Baap re baap.
So what do you do, right? So it's so embedded, it's such a systemic
Yeah.
process that's embedded.
I thought,
One second before you go on. I'm only laughing here because I'm completely mind fucked right now. And I'm not
yeah.
kidding when I say this.
Yeah, I didn't think like we were. I didn't even know all the like. I only read about stuff like the Catholic community being thora, what do you call, discriminatory when it comes to what are you saying something?
Let's just say not accepting.
Not accepting, yeah. So, but this actually playing out with our own school and the authorities in their own school is little. I don't know. It's surprising. I didn't know it really happens in the very place I went to school to for
Surprising
12
is a
years.
very big understatement. जो मेरा फट गया है सुन के. I'm
हाँ तो हम लोग इतना बड़ा ऐसे फ्लैग अगर वेव कर रहे हैं that right now let's all be progressive and all that, the fact that the people who raised us to such a large extent were
Oh my
themselves
god.
that homophobic is a little very surprising. So
Yeah,
Okay, one
yeah,
second.
absolutely.
Why were we not aware of this?
five
because we were
how
too because we were too dumb, I guess.
we and plus ये this is like
I
I
have
know
a solution to that question, but maybe I can come to it at the end
No,
when
no,
we,
go now, go
go
now.
Yeah,
there is
yeah.
no end.
What
You
at the end?
say
Yeah, just keep
जो
talking.
बोलना है बोलो.
You
There
can
is
give
no
us
end.
advice. Be our Tippany.
Yeah, it's because of cisgender privilege, right? And it's because of cumulative privileges which accumulate. So you have the privilege of belonging to a well, you have a life of wealth and status and all of that. So you're well off from a class perspective. You're well off and you're doing good from a caste perspective. You're from an ethnic community which is respected. You are heterosexual. You are cisgender. So all these, markers of identity, right? They add up, and they create this kind of super privilege, and that creates a bubble around you, right? And most of the people around you also have that protective bubble around them, and that's why you're in this bubble of ignorance, frankly, uh, which you don't understand and which you don't get to acknowledge or try to engage with in any way. And you're not even reading about this, right? Because it wasn't in our textbooks, it wasn't in the school curriculum. And I can talk about, later on, I'll mention how the uh, things like the government, the state, law, the media all play a role in creating this heteronormativity and creating and maintaining this um,
Yeah.
systemic prejudice in place.
Just to like give our listeners this little sense of clarity with regard to this bubble of ignorance that our caller's talking about. If you've recently seen that Women's Day ad that goes around on YouTube, the fact that if you've seen it, Adi Schmidt might have seen it.
बोल एक बार.
If you
Which one?
Yeah, so if you like, let's say there's a line of men and women standing in one line at
The
the beginning.
finance Paytm.
Yeah, the Paytm. Yeah. So if you have this privilege, take a step forward. If you have this, take step backward. So in the end, they see that men are way ahead and women are way behind. So this is basically thanks to many privileges that men have and women don't. Now amplify this with things like caste, class, gender as well. So we were way ahead than where our caller was. So therefore, we were on a bubble of our own. and did not
Yeah.
intersect with their bubble.
Bro, this bubble thing is
That's a
very
great
true,
example.
huh? Like, regardless of what
So
you
we're
are,
in the bubble, and so nobody's realizing that this is happening, right? And it's also systematic, and uh,
Mm.
you're going up to, and the thing is, it's being maintained on various levels, right? If you go to, and it happens. Let me give you some examples of this happening. So if you go to your parents and say, "I want to marry a girl or someone else from, let's say a girl from another religion,"
Mm.
you'll say, "I won't let you marry the girl from the other religion because it'll go against our family, right? Family honor." So things like this. So family is the site where uh, all of this, this kind of an identity discrimination is perpetuated and formed. And so your community becomes a way of uh, creating safeguarding and shielding you. And so we see this in all the social problems around us, be it marriage or religion. And that's why we have things like communalism. Rahul lives in the US, so he knows the race perspective, right? The black community, the
Mm.
Asian community. Recently in Atlanta, there
Recently,
was,
Yeah.
yeah, the uh,
attack
violence
on
against the
yeah.
Asian community in Atlanta. So that was there. We've had the uh, what was the, oh no, I'm forgetting the name of the movement. Um,
Black Lives
Black
Matter.
Black Lives
Black
Matter.
Lives Matter.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter movement. We've had the Me
Yeah.
Too movement. So we've seen that identity markers play a role in how we shape, right?
Also,
Yeah.
this particular facet that you said, do you think to a certain extent that your family and your peers to a certain extent become like echo chambers of those same beliefs, like they echo whatever your wrong belief is or your incorrect belief is?
Absolutely, because I come from a family which is very casteist, very classist,
Hmm.
very heteronormative, and very homophobic, right? So the school environment was a direct reflection of my family environment because I couldn't go to my relatives at home or people I was growing up with, people who were shaping and molding me, because that's what they also perpetuated. They said, it's wrong, you're abnormal, you need to. So obviously I couldn't have those conversations with them in the first place.
Hmm.
So that's why and that's why I'm not even out to them. uh, I took a very long time to come out to my mother, and she was incredibly supportive. And the reason I couldn't come out to her because of this entire system of heteronormativity had created this system where I thought, I'd probably be kicked out of the house if I talked about it,
Oh
or
no.
I'll be, so you have these images of how, so you start seeing how people treats. And so, when you see that you're being subjected to a transphobic slur like chakka in school,
Hmm.
the image that comes to mind is the transgender person on the road, and you think, what do I do? Do I have to live my life on the streets? Will I have to
Oh.
beg? Will I be disowned by my family? Will I have to, spend a life of poverty? And these are the kind of thoughts you have, and you're completely alienated from the family environment, from the school environment, and so you're subjected to this systematic discrimination.
So I had a
Heavy stuff.
question.
See, I told you.
Yeah, heavy stuff, heavy
Yeah.
stuff. Uh, when you
A
mentioned
bottle
this
of water.
cycle, yeah, you mentioned this cycle of loneliness that you had, and you also mentioned that you don't have much of support. You didn't have that much of support, but the way you are speaking about it right now, I'm assuming that that cycle of loneliness did end, and you have some
Yeah.
sort of support now. So if how did that come
Yeah.
about into your life? And let's say ideally what we're trying to do is one, build conversation around such topics so that young Joyjeev might listen to this podcast and be more aware and get out of his ignorance bubble. And two, also other young callers also know how to approach with such problem and get out of such
Mm.
cycles of loneliness. So
Yeah.
if some advice you had for them as well, they could take inspiration from your story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did get out of this, this cycle of loneliness when I went out of school, and when I went into college, and everybody had a certain level of awareness. People
Right.
had most of them had humanities. Most of them knew about societal problems. So there was a already level of awareness to begin with, which we didn't have in school, because in the science section, the science people are only studying science, the commerce people are only studying commerce, and in humanities we didn't even have. We had a portion of this in sociology, but just a portion. Maybe it was just a line or a paragraph, and that's it. Yeah. And so where is the conversation happening in our subjects? We're not taught this in history, in geography, we are taught social science for 12 years, but for 10 years. But where are the problems that we talk about in social science? And we're taught, and none of this comes up in science or the commerce subjects that we're taught, right? So when I went into college, it was a complete change of environment, because I could dress as I want to. There was no uniform, firstly, to begin with, right?
Nice.
So you're not disciplined. Yeah, you're not disciplined in a certain way, which Ishmeet might have had it different, because Ishmeet had a system of you had to have a dress code in St. Xavier's
Hmm.
College. For Rahul, it might have been very different, because he might have gone to a college in US, which was very chill. I went to a college which was very chill. So yeah, so same for Jersey. Okay. So
Bhai phasa. Chappal,
we were
no
having these
slippers.
conversations. Yeah.
Sorry. Go on.
Uh-huh. And then I started having these conversations, and then there were queer collectives, and they were collectives of various sorts, where you could go and you could learn about these terms, where you could see diversity, right? So you could see uh, more people like you, right?
Hmm.
And who would be able to have these conversations with you. Um, and so I met queer people like me. We had conversations. We had a collective. There were posters. There were signs. We went to Pride March. Uh,
Brilliant.
Several things that we did. So and there were professors who were very supportive, and you realize that this doesn't happen in so many colleges and universities across India and elsewhere, because there's a complete invisibilization, right, of categories such as
Yeah.
the marginalized. So
Mhm.
if you're a Dalit person, say in terms of caste, or if you're underrepresented in terms of class, if you're a person of color in the USA, or if you're queer in India or in South Asia, you don't have representation. You don't have representation in the media. There are no laws which support you. The lawmakers aren't concerned, because they're already in this system of heteronormativity and
Hmm.
heterosexualization. Mhm. And so the media isn't supporting you, because they're portraying queer characters in a very stereotypical way, and they're perpetuating these stereotypes on screen. So you have characters who will sort of wave their hands and be funny, and so you're taught to think that this is funny while you're watching it in the movies, right? And
Yes.
yeah, so you're
Hmm.
into this entire feedback loop, and this it becomes a huge echo chamber where these problems
Hmm.
are perpetuated and systematically perpetuated.
I, I've been a part of that the movie thing, right? Because like when you say ki, when you imagine somebody who's a Sardar, or right, every movie represents ki funny guy, can't speak English very well, has a very weird
Yeah.
look about himself, and they've actually been people who've actually spoken about ki tum log stereotype kar dete ho, and that's what plays into people's mind. That's why Santa Banta jokes are still told to Rahul by Rahul's Nanu when he was young, right? Because
Yeah,
that is what was shown to them in movies and shows, and I've personally also faced that, so I completely know where you're coming from here. Like कि ये तो ऐसे चलेगा, ऐसे
yeah,
करेगा, वो करेगा, ऐसे बात करेगा. I know it
You
sucks.
know, when you spoke about it not being in our textbooks, nobody talks
Mm.
about it because
hmm,
it's not taught to us, right? The first thing I thought was like, this is
yeah,
something that needs to be taught at a very young age. Can you please tell me
uh-huh.
what did we do in value education class in junior school?
Whoa.
Oh,
Scam. Next level scam that was.
अरे that
कुछ
wasn't
तो
like
सीखा नहीं.
कुछ नहीं भाई, वो मैम आती थी कुछ खोल के, nothing, and we used
No,
to
no, no. First,
learn
first
maths.
in the like class 4, 5, and all, we learned how to like table manners. I think
हाँ
table
हाँ
manners, how to cross the road,
हाँ
uh, basic hygiene,
हाँ.
I think that's all I learned.
And how to talk to, how to say hello, ये parents के ये सब all these, how to respect seniors
Shit,
apparently.
shit like
उसके
this is
बाद
more
घंटा.
important than art class, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, art class.
totally.
Where you were saying, caller, that there's like how to solve this, right? I think you were saying you were gonna say towards the end. So I think you can tell us right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. I'll come to that, but let me just, since
Sure.
you raised the question of community and ethnic stereotypes, I'll go back to
Right, right.
the stereotypes episode which you were talking about, and I'll bring in these examples of how, so uh,
Hashtag
Ishmael
plug
talked
in.
about his experience
Yeah.
in the stereotypes episode, right? And
Hmm.
so I could see that there were sick people around me, peers of mine who belong to the Sikh community, who were derided uh, with that particular term, the derogatory term. And there was a friend, he took it as a minor inconvenience. He didn't say anything. In fact, he laughed it off. But I'm
Hmm.
sure deep down it was bothering him and it
Very
was
hurtful.
troubling him, and it was very hurtful. And you know, uh, and he was trying to live in a system or maybe thrive in a system where you just have to laugh it off. But the
Yeah.
situation is, you shouldn't have to be in a system where
At
you
all.
have to laugh it off. You have to live in a system which talks about things and which treats people with respect and self care. And so we talk about self care and self love, right? And so all of that comes in much later. We're taught to things like self care and self love after we've been um, discriminated against. Thank you for that, for the
Yes.
applause. Okay.
No, I don't know how to remove it. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
Go on. Go on. Go on.
This is what we deal with on a daily basis.
Shut up. Go on. Go on, caller. Yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, non-Bengali peers who were humiliated as marus, right, and as banias, they were stereotyped as money-minded and cunning. So you had these completely, false stereotypes which were being propagated, and you actually laughed because you thought they were funny, but they were deeply troubling and hurtful to other people, right? And so you didn't realize what was happening. And Bengali peers who were derided as bookworms or nerds and general no use. And so you see how the stereotypes play out. And in
Hmm.
psychology, what happens is, the first is the level of stereotype, then it transforms into prejudice, where it's covert or overt in certain ways, through verbal usage or through actions or gestures, and then it turns into full blown discrimination, physical assault, molestation. And let me tell you, my experiences with physical assault have not been easy. Um, it's a difficult thing for me to talk about, so I won't go into it because I wouldn't have to recon my trauma of talking about it right now. But there have been attacks in school. I had to go into the toilet to cry. I couldn't tell the teacher because there was no one to listen. I couldn't tell all this at home and sort of recount this back at home. And so let me go to the question of mental health here, because at this point, the one person you need in a system where you don't have teachers and family is the therapist. But unfortunately, in Indian society and in South Asian society,
Yes,
many
thank
societies,
you. Thank you so
mental health
much.
is a stigma.
It's
Yeah,
it's oh
mental
my
health is a
God,
stigma.
it's absolutely incredible. It's like I'm talking to somebody and in India, okay, and I'm talking about like, okay, my friend's going to therapy, okay. Like
Yeah,
I completely support it because I think everybody is mentally fucked up. Fact of life. Um,
absolutely.
and I talked to this person in India, and that person in India is like, "Oh, this is such an American concept," and I'm like, "No, like, come on, do you not realize?" And this person is like, like right now, older people have become negative, and I was like, it's not older people only; it's the younger people are also very negative, and they're not very confident, right? And they're going through their own mental issues, and that's why they need a therapist because they can't go to anybody else. It's like, for example, it might be a little bit off topic, but say today, if I want to talk about something in my head, if Georgie, you're like one of my best friends. if I come to you and I tell you about this issue, sometimes I might not, because I already know how you're going to react. That bias is always, the prejudice is also going to be there. You
Yeah.
know, I don't want to talk to you
And sometimes
about
you
that.
just need a fresh perspective. Yeah, you
Exactly.
just need a new person to give you an
Absolutely.
answer, not even an answer, just give a statement, just hear you out.
Absolutely. And it's not a concept that needs to be looked down upon. And it's something that really needs to be supported, I feel.
True. Did
Yeah,
you,
totally.
caller? Did you have like? Did you have a therapist, and how did that go about? How did you access your therapist, and how
Yeah,
does one
Yeah.
go about accessing therapists in
super
India
important, I
or
think.
And
wherever?
when, like, how did you realize that, like, this is the best way to go about your issues?
Yeah. So, I so mental health. The conversation around mental health in school was zero, right? Because friends weren't talking about it. We didn't have a fucking therapist in school. Yeah, we didn't have mental health services provided in school, which other schools, surprisingly, some of the other ones in our city in Calcutta had. They had a career counselor in some
Hmm.
cases. They had a therapist in some cases, but we had zero. Right? We who was there to talk to when you can't confide in friends or family. And so when I went to the therapist, it wasn't surprising that the psychologist slash therapist said that my depression and anxiety started in middle school and way before middle school. And so I wasn't taken aback because I knew that since it's been happening from such a young age, class 3, 4, and 5. Uh, yeah, I actually in class 2, someone told me, walk properly or you can't play with us on the field. Yeah, so it starts as early as class 1 and 2.
7-year-old
So
kid.
it's quite horrible. 7-year-old kid. Yeah. And there was a friend of mine who said, he came up to me and he said, uh, I think of you as a friend, but in order for you to be my friend, I can't play with you because everybody else calls you girly. So it'll be a problem if I associate with you.
Cool.
So
Trying to be cool.
let's just call it quits. And he just walked away, and I was like, okay, is this how it works? Right? And so you're left completely crushed as to, you're just being yourself, but the person can't see that, the person can't understand that and empathize with that, right? And so across several institutions across the country, experiences of children having been bullied, coerced, ignored, or simply not fitting in have been ample and several. And India as a country has had a culture of ignoring mental health. And there have been prevalent studies, where mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, many others, among Indian university students, school students, has been highlighted. But these aren't coming to the fore because our government isn't talking about it. People in power aren't talking about it. Our politicians aren't addressing this, right? What are our politicians doing? They're talking about money and they're talking about all kinds of nonsense that's going around, right?
There, there is
So
a
where
there is a very, if you've read the recent transgender protection bill, that's the new debate that's running around as to how fucked up that is. Are you actually,
how
have
fucked
you
up
read
that
that?
is. I haven't read it, but I know the discourse around it is pretty harsh, and
Yeah.
transgender people aren't being accorded their rights.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Joe, can you
it's
enlighten?
pretty.
Like, I think it's important for. Just in short, I have no idea, and I'm
So
not.
basically, to be identified as a transgender, you need to go to a particular magistrate and get an identity card that says you're a transgender first. Okay, and to get such a identity card in the first place, in the beginning there was a requirement of a medical examination to get a card. Okay, then gradually when the rules came out and people protested against it, they were like, no, now you don't need the card, only thing you need is an affidavit. So basically, if just someone states, first of all, it depends on the magistrate to tell you that you're a transgender now. So that's not how it
Hmm,
works. You
obviously.
don't need a card that says that you're a heterosexual person or you're whatever. So why do you need a card in the first place? Next, also with regard to punishment, let's say there are crimes, proper serious crimes of, let's say, sexual assault, which are some huge amounts for a normal person against a norm. I will not use the term normal, against an non-transgender person. But against a transgender person, the punishment is just some 3 years. So that shows clear bias and discrimination. Why is sexual assault against a non-transgenders so great and so immense, but an assault against a transgender person is just for like 3 years imprisonment or something? So there are many other facets to it. If someone can, I think we can link down the entire act as well as the rules below in our description so that people can access it and actually build discourse around it.
Hmm. Good. Say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and if we think of the transgender issue in school, we were lucky enough to be cisgender, right? So our sex matched our gender, and so we didn't have that problem. But and to my knowledge, I don't know whether we had transgender peers or transgendered kids at school, but I'm sure there must have been. And so the fact that they've been completely invisibilized speaks to the kind of mass invisibilization, blanket suppression of their identity, suppression of their voices that happens. So they're essentially being unable to speak out in this system, and so they have to they're completely silenced about these issues, and so they have to spend entire school, this entire journey of 12 years in silence. So to think about that, it's very crushing.
And it's also damn sad. I think one of the reasons how we see how sad it is the fact that Ishmeet hasn't spoken throughout this like episode and he's completely quiet, and also the fact that both of us, at least Rahul and I, we look like we're smiling, but I think this is absolutely nervous laughter because we don't know how exactly to react other than just, I don't know, smile nervously about it.
Yeah, I think this is
And
the episode has spoken the least.
I
don't know.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
be
know.
very honest here, but Ishmael, like, I'm so glad we spoke about stereotypes.
yeah,
I
And
know.
like, and how deep we got into it.
Yeah, man. I told you like that episode in the start only. I said कि ये बहुत खतरनाक episode है मेरे लिए. I'm gonna
Yeah,
go right down, and I think I've heard three people also actually saying कि it, कि अच्छा तुम ये वाला बात बोला because मेरे को भी ये वाली बात कहनी थी or whatever. So I was anyway. I'm glad it has helped you out as well. At least I think that's what hit your mind. कि yeah, I can possibly have a conversation regarding this.
Yeah.
and
Like
I feel like there's so many stereotypes, and people talk about positive stereotypes also. For
मतलब
example, let me say that, okay, Indians, especially here, being good at math, then Indians winning spelling bees. Positive in the sense, like, okay, it's the same thing. It's like
Got it.
me
Yeah.
constantly telling you that you're good at something, and you feeling very good about it, and even like focusing your actions on becoming better at
Got
that.
it. So you say people are like you in South Asia, एक तरीके से. What Chinese people are very good at everything. They'll if Georgie is a very good person at playing the drums, they're going to be somebody who will be 430 times better.
Yeah, whatever it is, but I just don't think like it's positive overall, because when people tell you and you like it, you start doing it to other people.
General, हाँ,
You
सही.
start generalizing it a lot more, and this is something we see every day. And I think I had one more point, but see, again, that moment has passed where I have just forgotten my point.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll also bring in quickly. So since we are, wrapping the episode, I'll quickly bring in um, two other things, a couple of other things which I wanted to talk about, which is
Go on.
the discourse around body shaming. Yeah, which was also very horrible, and it goes back to our conversations on body shaming that has happened in the podcast in the stereotype episode, right? That uh, in our school you were at the pinnacle of privilege if you played sports and if you had an athletic build, or if you
Yes.
were lean or toned or muscular, right? But for someone like me who was fat and far from thin, uh, for all my life, it was really hard, and so the environment was like that of, so everybody talked about it. There was silent public glances, there was public collective laughter, and so you feel attacked by those by those silences. And so I coped by binge eating my feelings away, and it was particularly hard. um, and also to bring back the point that this kind of violence that we see, so in societally, is also rooted in language, and things like objectification and commodification. So, if I could just quickly talk about this discourse around women and how women were objectified in our everyday conversations while at school.
Yeah.
That's a very dark road to go down, right? Because uh, in middle school, people started talking about it, and that was also the time, you know, we started interacting with girls and women our age. And so this entire conversation around women was very regressive. Uh,
Hmm.
and
But how do you how do you address that? Let's say someone is being very harsh in their language. I really can't really think of a better word. I think there's a much worse word than
yeah, so
harsh. Yeah.
yeah. Let me just explain the example. So,
Okay.
so conversations around women were in bad taste, colored with remarks ranging from body shaming and description of attraction of towards certain body types of women, right? So first came the mundane everyday phrases, which were sexist, like girls cook better than boys, or, women can't drive, or girls think too much of themselves. And then came phrases which unsettled, and it many of occasions detested me to the point of disturbance, which was have you seen her boobs, or have you seen graphic, horrible descriptions of women's bodies. And
Hmm.
so, or maybe, I'd like to fuck her brains out, which were uncomfortably graphic and unforgiving references to women's bodies, which were being justified through language processes, yeah, of everyday life. And this is all dismissed as boys' locker room talk. And as we would have it in 2020, it gained national attention that things like this was happening in schools. Women were being talked about in regressive light, in plain violent terms, right? In crass, it was being seen as cool, while it was absolutely the opposite of cool. It was objectification, obscene commodification, and plain, linguistic violence.
Sometimes
So,
teachers as well, I guess.
of course, yeah. And perhaps if there's a caller from a girls' school, uh, they can tell you better of how that happens in a girls' institution, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing is, the solution is to stop the conversation right there and tell your peers that this is not cool, right? So the same thing which happens when in a conversation on stereotypes, say when a sick peer is being called, the p word, the derogatory word, you have to stop smiling, and you have to say this is not cool, and I'm not going to talk about this. And you have to sit down with your peers and have that difficult, that unsettling, that uncomfortable conversation, that we guys, we can't talk about this. This is disturbing. This is problematic. And the reason we couldn't do this, because we didn't know how to have a conversation among ourselves, right? We didn't
Yeah.
want to upset our peers, or we didn't want to,
Hmm.
say,
Think of them.
we thought that if we talked about this, yeah. Think
We
of that.
might not
So if we
remain
talked about
friends.
this, yeah, exactly. So lose
Because
the
I've tried
friendship.
doing that. Yeah, I've tried doing that, and it hasn't
Yeah.
really worked out. That it didn't work out that well. Then, abhi to theek hai.
Yeah, so you feel that you lose out your friendship, and you won't be able to remain friends with them, or they'll outcast or ostracize you in some way, and you're not taught how to have this important conversation of sitting still in a very mature way with a serious expression on your face, and having that difficult conversation,
No, it's very
and telling
true.
your friend that it's hurtful. Yeah,
So it's
And
very
telling your friend it's.
Hurtful.
and telling your friend that it's very hurtful. Yeah, whatever you said
Hmm.
is
it's very true. Like
horrible.
even now, if somebody says something, it's like I have to think a couple of times before saying something because I'm just like, okay, this person is going to continuously make fun of me to my peers and then talk about it behind my back and not treat me the same way. And then I've seen other people not do it because they think they're not going to be considered cool anymore. Because
Yeah,
And
you can have that conversation. It's much easier for me to have that conversation with either of you than for me to go with somebody who I just know, who I'm decent friends with, because that person has a very different perspective of you. And this entire thing of objectifying women, of calling names, even now, I mean, I've seen it happen so many times. We're 23 years old, but it still happens.
But how do
And
you have such conversation? How do you like sit someone like, let's say I am at I'm in class 8, okay? How do
Mhm.
I sit someone down and have this hard conversation? Clearly, I'm really insecure about my friends to a certain extent. I have not been friends with these people to such a long time. I would still, if I imagine myself in class 8 right now, I don't think I would still have that conversation because
right.
I would be scared.
And
That's what he
see,
said. You don't know how to
it's
approach it.
very, you have to be very, very, I want to say, you have to have the guts to do it.
Hmm.
It's like you have to be like, at that moment when that person says something, be like, no, like I don't want any part of this conversation anymore.
You know,
And
one
it's
of the
very difficult to do that.
it is. And Rahul, just to add one more thing, you mentioned those 3 4 points. Ki what will the person think of me? Kya equation hai? There's one more point. It is betrayal. You trust, like, I don't know whether, I hope it has not happened with anybody. You trust somebody, so say after a long time you think ki chalo ye mera acha dost ban gaya, then you actually tell the person about what you're feeling, something nobody knows, and then that person just maybe goes and rats out and announces it, and then you lose the entire concept of trust. The entire thing is brittle and it's broken. You will never trust anybody after that. And imagine, every relationship in the world, I feel, is built on trust. And if the ethos of that is, played around,
Dagmaga raha.
dagmaga gaya, matlab pura dismantled, then you're fucked
Yeah.
for life.
Can I add
Yeah.
to that? And I just want to say this, like, this kind of situation is very sensitive because, okay, I'm assuming it's five of us, okay, five people having a conversation. I have one of my friends who's close to me, who says something very vulgar, and if I stop
Yeah.
him at that point of time, right, it looks very bad on him. He can be very embarrassed, right? But if I have that conversation with him after, later on, only he knows what I feel. The other three people don't know and are
And
not
then
even
he might
aware of
think
it.
only you have a problem with that and not the others, and why you're creating an issue about it. There's just so many
Yeah.
permutations and combinations of this, and it's irritating. And then that's why people are like, chodo, मैं कुछ बोलूंगा ही नहीं, I'll just turn
Exactly,
blind.
exactly.
What do you think about
You don't
this?
want to deal with it. It's just that
Yeah.
you're turning a blind eye
It's like you're
again.
inviting trouble, एक तरीके से. What do you think about that? Call up. Hate calling it call up, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% in agreement. So you're in an environment where you can't talk about it because the friendship is fragile, and you can't trust people around you, and you have this fear of whether he'll rat me out or something, as Ishmeet said. And completely agreeing with what Rahul said. uh, this fear which permeates in every moment. So it's a traumatizing experience because you have to go through school living a lie, right? And people spend lives living this lie, right? And they don't come out. They don't come out as queer. They don't come out as gay, as transgender, of the various kinds of genders and sexualities that you have. And they don't talk about mental health, and they don't talk about stereotypes, and it completely puts you at a point where your mental health is deteriorates rapidly, and you have a horrible childhood, and you grow up to perpetuate that because you don't realize that's wrong. So you become adults who don't have mature conversations, and therefore
Yeah.
perpetuate these kinds of thinking, regressive thinking, to other people, right? So our people in power, if you look at our authorities, if you look at government, and that's how ideology functions, because you have certain ideologies, political ideologies, actively propagating this. You have political ideologies which say women are inferior to men. You have political ideologies which say um, being gay is a crime. You have religions, many religions which are regressive and say that uh, queerness is wrong and you're going against God. So you need to have these. You need to be surrounded by people, And if you're not having these difficult conversations, you're very privileged in life, right? You have your steps ahead than most people. But the point is to what is the point then of being privileged? The point is to have these conversations so that other people can join in the conversation. And so just because you guys talked about stereotypes and prejudices, I thought, wow, this is a great segue. I can make a great segue into this conversation by adding my story, right? And this is how
Yep.
you build a community. This is how you build community and solidarity among people. And you start having these conversations, which don't happen because they're invisibilized.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Exactly.
You know, on a conclusive note, you mentioned, caller, that there was a point of time you weren't finding enough people to support you, and even now you finally have. There's always a plus
Yeah.
three now. Keep that in mind.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Being very
I will
honest,
be
because
talking to you guys. Yeah, Polo.
100. So I was just saying, I think when we
Go
started
on.
off with this, now when Georgie Van Dal started off with this, we were like, "Ki kya karna hai, pata nahi. Let's just start this podcast." And then eventually, I think Georgie Van summed it up very well. He mentioned, "Ki let it be a place where it's like three people having a conversation, and you are in the same room with somebody and who might have these feelings, and we are actually, helping you get it out." Like, I'm explaining in a very layman-ish kind of a way. And eventually, when Joyji brought up this idea, ki guys, let's do something like this as well. And I initially was like, bhai, kyun karna hai? Why? Let's just keep it at its rate. But now I'm glad. Be very honest, Joe. Like yesterday, I was telling you, bro, are you sure we want to do something like this? And I'm like, I'm glad we did it, because I have learned so many things, and I know how responsible I have to be, and how responsible I have to make sure, like, I'll take this up as a responsibility to make sure the others around me hear this. And more importantly, even if they don't hear it, they learn, they should know what to do, or even not what to do, what
just
not
being
to do.
just being
Just being
aware of it,
aware.
and
Let them
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
just
yeah,
that
Just being
much,
aware,
just
yeah,
sow the
what to do.
seed and let them deal with it after that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
I think that's
yeah.
where this podcast comes in. The fact that we build conversations around such topics, I think it became very, like, I realized while I was editing a particular podcast कि ये बात हम already 10 बार बोल चुका है
कर चुका है,
और
हाँ.
हम हाँ और why should we talk about the same things over and over again? Therefore, I think there's a definite need for fresh perspective, and therefore we require our listeners to come in, take use of this opportunity, and tell us their
हाँ.
part of the side of the story. And also, if you identify with our caller, definitely uh take his advice, and also share this podcast to as many people as you can, so that you can communicate them through us. Maybe if you're
Beautiful.
not that confident as to face them up front, you can shoot through our shoulders. Hamare
Yeah.
kandho pe banduk laga ke you can shoot and address this. Shoot through the shoulder. That's the
Powerful,
phrase,
powerful.
Rahul. You might be unaware, but
Yeah, I'm very unaware right now, but nice.
You guys
so
remember this?
that's
Oh my,
oh.
If
so
for
cute.
people who follow us on our Instagram, we got gift this to buy one of our subscribers.
So
Anyway,
yeah.
go on. Oh, was it empty? I didn't know. I thought it was empty. Shit. Sorry. Go on, Joe.
Yeah, so Ishmit got gifted a Nerf gun because he asked for one, or really demanded one, I guess. I don't know what he did, but he has fans. Rahul and I don't. And he got gifted a Nerf gun because it was his childhood dream to have one. Anyway, any last words, caller, on this beautiful, beautiful episode that we have?
Last words. I'm very glad that I could have this conversation. I'm very grateful to for the fact that this conversation started in the first place through this podcast, and I was very curious. These were three people who I wasn't particularly close to in school, but they were so I was curious. Ki, chalo dekhte hai. It started off with as let's see what they're talking about, and when there were conversations around difficult things, that's when I said, hey, it's not just fluff, it's not just fun and maza and all of that. There are serious stuff. There's serious stuff in this as well, so let me add to that. And yeah, and so to the listeners, I'd say, just please keep having conversations. Please go seek therapy, seek help for yourself. If you don't know what to do, there are just Google. Google is a great tool. I Googled my way through many things. I had to Google therapy, and thankfully, I had a support system in college. But many people don't have that, right? Many people aren't privileged enough to have that. And so just talk about it, just make people aware, and just
Yeah.
and being kind to each other, right? Being kind and empathetic, and just not make fun of people, not being mean or go out of your way to look cool, or
Mhm.
be that particular, look that particular way of
Right.
appearing cool or being masculine or whatever.
Hashtag plug in episode number 2. Good one, caller. Good one.
So I think that was a beautiful way to end our episode. I don't think anything else needs to be said. With that, we'll conclude our episode. And if you want to be our next caller on our next episode, I think next week we'll definitely have the link put up on our bios, Instagram or our Twitter. So keep an eye out for that. And
Yeah.
maybe who knows, you could be our next caller and you could join us on our podcast.
Yes, please do. And we have to say this. I'm sorry, but yes, guys, like, share, subscribe. And I think for this, something like this, I'm going to say subscribe also, because YouTube is, go watch, like, and just everybody share this. This is important. This entire episode is super. Don't share any episodes. Mat subscribe karo, mat kuch karo, but ye episode ko zarur share karo. People need to know. People need to hear. Georgie, apna phone band kar. People need to know. People need to hear. It is very important. Thank you so much. This is Ishmeet Singh Batra.
Excuse me.
मेरा फ्लो बिगाड़ दिया यार.
Email
बोल.
at 3FAATY@gmail.com.
हाँ, वो भी
We enjoy our fan mail.
yeah, we do. On that
We've
note,
been getting a lot also recently. So you might be our next mail. We could read it out also on our next
and we
podcast.
got gifts. And send us gifts, guys. I still have a fishing rod which is supposed to come. And Georgie needs a new T-shirt because वो एक ही कपड़ा पहनता है every podcast episode.
That is the
and
point of it. That is the point.
Oh,
I wear black,
jeez.
he wears red.
Come on. Just
Hello
gift
guys,
him a
with
gift.
that, bye bye.
Hafiz, take care. Sat Sri Akal. Aho.
Wait, I'm gonna stop recording now.